Hello and welcome to an Affinity Revolution tutorial. My name is Ezra Anderson, and today we're going to learn digital painting in Affinity Photo for iPad. Today we'll be focusing less on the artistic side of painting and more on the technical side of how you can harness Affinity's power to make your own digital works of art. After opening Affinity Photo, the first thing you'll want to do to begin your digital painting is come up to the Layer Studio and make a new pixel layer by pressing on the plus button. Then we're going to select our Paintbrush tool. With our Paintbrush tool selected, we can begin painting. The first thing you might want to change though is the color of your paint. We can change the color of our paintbrush by clicking on the color circle in the contextual toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Then choose whatever color you want. If you want to save your new color for future use, we'll come to the Color Studio. At the bottom of the Color Studio, we'll select Swatches. To save this color as a swatch, we'll press on the menu at the top right, and then press Add Current Fill to Palette. You can see that our color has now been added as a swatch, and we can always come back and select it to make sure we're using the same color for future projects. Along with the color, you might also want to change the style of your paintbrush, which we can do by coming to the Brushes Studio. Inside the Brushes Studio, all we need to do is click on the brush category name, and then we can select any of these brush categories to choose from. Then you can begin painting with your new paintbrush. In addition to the brush categories that come with Affinity Photo, you can also install new brushes. If you'd like to learn how to do this, I'll leave a link in the video description for another one of our tutorials where we learn how to add brushes into Affinity Photo. The next thing we're going to look at is our brush options in the contextual toolbar. Before we look at these options though, I'm going to undo a couple of times to clear our document. The first thing we can change is our brush width. By clicking and dragging to the right, we can make our paintbrush's width larger. If we click and drag to the left, we can make it smaller. Or we can just tap once on the icon and then type in whatever number we want. The next option we want to look at is brush hardness. To see how hardness works, I'm first going to change my width to a larger number and then paint once using 100% hardness. Now let's see what our paintbrush will look like if we lower our hardness to 0%. As you can see, having 0% hardness gives our brushstroke very soft edges. This is good if you're trying to blend two parts of your painting together. And of course, you can use a number in between 0 and 100 to have just a little bit of hardness. The next option we're going to look at is brush opacity. Before looking at opacity though, I'm going to undo once again to clear our document. If we paint with 100% opacity, then our paint will be completely visible. But if we lower our opacity to around 10%, then only 10% of our paint will be applied as we begin painting. If we paint over the same area again though, then another 10% of our paint will be applied. This only works though if you lift up your pencil. If you keep painting back and forth without lifting up the pencil, then only 10% will be applied. It's only when you lift up the pencil and then paint again that another 10% will be applied. Next, let's take a look at flow. To see how flow works, we'll first bring the opacity back up to 100%. Then we'll lower the flow to around 10%. As we begin painting, you'll notice that only 10% of our paint is being applied, but as we go up and down, more of our paint will be applied. The difference between flow and opacity is when you're using flow, you don't need to lift up your pencil. As you can see, flow and opacity are very similar, and it's really a matter of preference which one you want to use when you're painting. Generally, I like to keep 100% opacity and then lower my flow so I don't need to keep lifting up the pencil over and over. We're now going to take a look at a couple more of our brush options by pressing on More in the contextual toolbar. Our first options are very similar to what we had in the contextual toolbar. We have size, hardness, flow, and accumulation. Accumulation is very similar to opacity. One option we didn't have before, though, is spacing. At the top, we can see a preview of our paintbrush, and you'll notice that the paintbrush is really just a series of circles being blended together. If we wanted to make our paintbrush stroke more seamless, then we could decrease the spacing in between all of the circles. Some of the most important options for digital painting are found at the top under the Dynamics tab. The first thing you'll want to change is the size randomness of your paintbrush. Just make sure that you have your paintbrush set to pressure and not to random. You might also want to change your flow dynamics. And remember to set this to pressure as well. Bringing up these sliders to 100% and changing them to pressure makes it so our paintbrush will be darker and bigger as we press harder on the iPad, but will be lighter and smaller as we press more lightly. If you want less variance with these dynamics, you can always lower the sliders to something less than 100%. You can see that there's many more options for our paintbrush, but size and flow are the two that I use by far the most. When you're satisfied with all of the brush options, you can press OK. We want to see how our new paintbrush works, but right now our document is a little cluttered. Let's bring out the eraser tool and erase some of the paint that we've already done. Now we can go back to our paintbrush tool. I'm going to increase my flow back to 100%, and we'll also lower our brush width. Then we'll paint lightly on the iPad. Now we'll press down harder as we paint. Because of the options we changed, our paintbrush stroke is different depending on how hard we press on the iPad. Now that we've seen the basics of how digital painting works, let's try painting a small picture. As you're painting, it's a good idea to keep different parts of your picture on different layers. Just go up to the Layer Studio, and then press on the plus button to add a new pixel layer. Keeping different aspects of your painting on different layers gives you greater flexibility if you ever want to change anything. Now that we have our second pixel layer, let's start painting on this layer. Before I add a belly to this dinosaur, I'm going to make a new pixel layer. Then I'll paint a rough belly onto this dinosaur. Right now, it looks like our belly is floating on top of the dinosaur. Instead, we want the yellow belly to only be shown where the dinosaur's body is being shown. To do this, we can come to the Layer Studio and click and drag on the belly layer until it's on top of the dinosaur body layer. Just wait until you have this blue horizontal line before you release. We've just made the belly a child layer to the dinosaur. That means it will only be visible wherever the dinosaur is visible. Using child layers can be very useful when you're trying to clip certain parts of your painting to other aspects of it. Now I'm going to add another pixel layer and continue painting. But as you can see, this new pixel layer has automatically been added as a child layer to our dinosaur. I want this layer to go on the top, so I'm going to click and drag it on top of all of the other layers. Now I can continue painting. Right now these spikes are on top of the dinosaur, but I want them behind the dinosaur's body. Before I move this layer to the bottom though, I'm going to close up the dinosaur body's group by pressing on the triangle to the left of that layer. This helps so I don't accidentally make the spikes a child layer of the dinosaur. Now I'll just tap and drag to move this layer to the bottom. I'd say our painting is looking pretty good at this point, but maybe we want to change the dinosaur's color. To do this, we can add an HSL adjustment. Just come to the Adjustment Studio, and then select HSL. Now as we click and drag on the Hue slider, we can change the color of our painting. Right now, the HSL adjustment is only changing the color of the spikes. If we come to the Layer Studio, we can see that the HSL adjustment is underneath our other two layers. That's why it's not affecting them. If we tap and drag to bring the HSL adjustment to the top though, then it will affect our entire painting. We can also make the HSL adjustment a child layer to the dinosaur's body, so it will only affect that part of our painting. Just tap and drag on the HSL adjustment and place it on top of the dinosaur body layer and wait until you get this blue square. Then you can release. Now our HSL adjustment will only affect the dinosaur's body and not the layer above or beneath it. Finally, if we want to keep our painting more organized, we can place all of these layers inside of a group. Just swipe to the left on the layers you want to put inside of a group, and then press on the folder icon inside the Layer Studio. With all of these layers inside of one group, our Layer Studio is looking much more organized. If we ever want to select any individual layer, we can always open up our group by pressing on the triangle to the left of it. By having everything in one group though, we can easily move everything around with the Move tool. Just make sure you have the group selected inside the Layer Studio, and then you can move and resize your entire painting wherever you want. A great thing about digital painting is we can also duplicate all of our work. Just tap once with 2 fingers, and then press Duplicate. Now we can move our duplicate dinosaur so we can see both of them. If we want, we can flip the entire group by changing its width. We can also give this new dinosaur a different color. First, I'll open up the group by pressing on the triangle, and then I'll open up the dinosaur body group. Then I can double tap on the HSL adjustment, allowing me to change its color in the contextual toolbar. Affinity Photo is a powerful program, and by mastering a few tools, you can easily make beautiful digital paintings.